Yeah.
I know. Good evening. I'd like to get started if we could. Welcome to the May 1st, 2010 City Council meeting of Washougal. Mayor Guard had a scheduling conflict this evening, so I will be stepping in to chair the meeting tonight. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jennifer, will you please take the roll call?
Councilmember Coaston,
Present.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Here.
Councilmember Delavar,
Present.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Here.
Councilmember Morris, and Councilmember Russell.
Present.
Do we have any amendments to the agenda this evening?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to add one item for a discussion under new business of the zoning.
One item for discussion.
Well, discussion of the proposed zoning just under new business.
Is this general discussion? Could
Well-
that not be handled under council comment?
Well, I think it might be prudent, depending on how the discussion goes, for us to take action in just a simple motion for direction for the Planning Commission based on some of the testimony that we've heard so far. So nothing beyond just a simple motion is what I was envisioning.
Okay. Yes.
With all due respect, I think there's a public hearing that's already scheduled on this matter, and I wouldn't want to preempt that public hearing.
Question?
Yes.
How is it that council discussion preempts a public meeting?
That's a very good question. I would suggest that we have the public hearing, and then we also, are you talking about public comments or council comments?
I was thinking about the motion to add to the agenda there. I don't know what Councilman Delavar has got in mind, but I'd sure like to hear about it.
I don't know proper procedure in this case.
I think the statutory format for doing this, if I recall, since this is something I'm not real familiar with, is that they make a recommendation, then it comes before you in public hearing again, as I recall. So it seemed like it would be prudent to tell them to do something now at this point where the final say is going to be in your bailiwick, I believe.
Yes.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, would it be appropriate just to put on the agenda under new business, just a discussion?
Just a
Period.
general
Just
discussion.
a formal discussion.
Yes, I'll refer to our legal counsel.
No, I think the public hearing probably should predate any discussion. The way it would-
But that's not, we don't have to do it that way.
If it's legislative, I guess that probably you don't. If it's quasi judicial, you can't before the public hearing.
And I'm just curious why we need to do it now instead of a workshop. Because we've got workshop discussion on this scheduled already for a week from tonight.
Well, I didn't realize it was scheduled for next week. Okay. So,
I have zoning information for a workshop next week. I pulled it up.
then, by all means, let's have the discussion next week, no problem. Okay.
I would welcome Councilman Delavar's comments during council comment time
Will
if
do.
he would like to make comments regarding the zoning. Excellent. Moving along, any correspondence? Excellent. We're at the point in our agenda for the first public comment period. If there's anyone wishing to address the council, please step forward at this time and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Gary Larson. My address is 1121 Northeast Blair Road, Washougal. I'm here about the ambulance service and the level of staffing and the funding problems that exist. And I guess our concern is that the ambulance, that the level of service that's at right now, long-term, is not sustainable. Can't continue at this level. We sent an email to the entire council, I hope you all got it, outlining some talking points and some issues that we feel pretty strongly about. And don't get me wrong, I think we have an outstanding ambulance service. But at the funding level that it's at right now, it is not sustainable long-term. Comments? Okay? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson. Anyone else?
This is just as curious. Harvey Olson, 3903 R Street. I have been kept appraised, I guess if you could say, somewhat on the progress of the two fire departments and what is going to be discussed or voted on tonight. I wish to thank all of the staff members, city council members that have been involved, the mayor, if he was involved, and Chief Schumacher, especially for the efforts that he has made and the time he has put in to get to the point that you're at tonight. So I think allocates for everybody involved is appropriate, or a star, or whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Richard Hamby, 37015 Southeast Gibson Road, Washougal. I believe you have on your agenda as part of your spring supplemental budget request a discussion or a decision to be made about funding Highway 14 design work. And last summer, when the then existing plan was taken off the state's funding list, it was stated by one council member that this was just going to set us back a couple of years. It's pretty clear to me that it set us back more than that, and it's pretty clear to me that it wasn't good to set us back at all. But this is an essential step to make, or we're just sitting in the dead zone here. So I encourage you to vote in favor of that funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamby. Anyone else wishing to address the council at this time?
I'm Marilyn Tyrrell. I live at 950 G Street. I had the misfortune to have a fire on Thursday, and I want to break rule number 4, which is must be relative to city business, not directed to individuals. I want to thank all of you who came out. I've done a lot of crying since then, and most of it is in gratitude for the kindness that has been shown to me. Bad things happen to good people, but they give good people a chance to do good things. And I haven't seen anything I love so much as the sound of that machine coming down the street.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Larry Wagner, 627 20th Street. I see the EMS budget thing is in part of the financial thing. I don't know, it's not like in the consent agenda kind of thing. I don't know, I'd like you guys to pull the EMS 125 out as a separate issue to discuss and not vote on it as a package thing for the financial thing, and be voted on separately. I mean, y'all know kind of what my position on it is. It kind of reflects what they had to say earlier, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any others wishing to address the council at this time? Okay. Seeing none, moving to the consent agenda, what are the council's desires regarding the consent agenda?
I ask unanimous consent to pass the consent agenda.
Normally what we do is we read it first, but whatever.
Excellent. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Consent agenda consisting of, number one, joint Camas Washougal minutes for meeting April 18th, 2011. Number two, council minutes, April 18th, 2011. Number three, joint PC/CC minutes, April 25th, 2011. Number four, regular AP claims in the amount of $762,334.76. Check numbers 55701, 55810. Agenda Bill 53-11, a PSA with IT Pros Northwest. Agenda Bill 5411, PSA with Wallace, W Street Waterline Improvements Project. Agenda Bill 55-11, PSA with Wallace, WWTP Storage Building Project. Okay, excellent. Moving on to new business. We have Agenda Bill 56-11, 2011, Budget Amendment Number 1.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, included in your packet for consideration tonight is a 2011 budget supplemental information request. During the first quarter of 11, we have determined the budget request is necessary to correct some housekeeping items and request the use of general street and fire reserves for a few necessary projects. The agenda bill included aggregate adjustments and then also a detailed ordinance and support for those numbers in the packet. Our recommended actions are to read the ordinance by title only, amending the 2011 budget, and pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner. And I'm going to turn it over to City Administrator Scott for further input.
Thank you, Jennifer. Council, just as one final summary to make sure that we have the full scope of what's before you with the spring supplemental request, I'll focus primarily on the general street and fire fund because the bulk of the requests are there, and then Fund 125, the EMS fund. In the general street and fire fund, there are two specific projects that relate to our transportation infrastructure that are before you. One is for roughly $60,000, which is to enhance the E Street project pavement portion by doing the grind inlay, and we've gone over that on a couple of different workshops. The TIB has graciously brought almost $500,000 to our assistance for that, and so our expenditure leverages that $60,000 to make that necessary improvement. The other is a $291,000, or roughly 291, is that the amount? No, for the south side sidewalks, 287, excuse me. For another enhancement to the project, the sidewalks on the south side of E Street. As you recall, those were in some of the original designs for the project. They were value engineered out because of cost concerns. The project came in significantly under budget, as you know, because of the excellent bidding climate that we enjoy right now. And, the administration's recommendation on the south side sidewalks is that because sidewalks are consistent with our standard for that type of an arterial, that we move forward and put those in as part of the project now to enhance the delivery of that. It's a significant expenditure, we understand, a little over $250,000. It's a use of reserves. It's a one-time use, not an operational expenditure. Eventually, we will need to put those sidewalks in, and I can imagine us sitting here 10 years from now contemplating those sidewalks and wondering where we might find significant dollars to do that, and wondering about this opportunity that we have today. So it's our recommendation that this would be an appropriate and prudent leveraging of your reserve dollars, but it's acknowledged that it's a significant amount relative to the reserves that we have, but we still think it's a prudent investment for the community. You heard some testimony from some folks that were advocating that this would enhance safety and business traffic along that part of the corridor. I don't know if there's any other questions on the General Street and Fire Fund, but there's some other smaller items that are in there just for some necessary things that weren't contemplated when we passed the original budget.
Would you explain that first project again, please?
Do we have to have a motion on the floor? Well, I was just going to say, I'd ask unanimous consent that we read the ordinance by title only.
I'd rather get that identified.
But generally, we can't discuss without having a motion on the floor.
That's correct.
May I ask a technical question, though? If we do this by consent, by reading the title only, then at the next one and pass post, can we break it down? Sure. Okay.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, I'm not asking for discussion. I'm asking for a clarification of what he said earlier.
I think that would be appropriate during staff report. I think we're in our staff report phase, and, yeah. So the first one that I mentioned, Councilman Shoemaker, is a grind inlay for the pavement section along the E Street project that was engineered out of the project earlier due to cost concerns. However, the pavement section ended up being in worse shape.
Okay, now I know the one.
And so we're leveraging $60,000 against about $500,000 from the TIB.
I got it.
So I ask unanimous consent that we read the ordinance by title only.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 1680, adopting the annual budget of the city of Washougal for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2011.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, post, and publish the ordinance in the usual manner.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we amend the motion to separate out mention of EMS Fund 125 to be considered separately.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Point of order. Would that, I mean, that would be an amendment to the main motion, not a separate motion, correct?
It's an amendment to remove the EMS 125 from the main motion.
Okay, because that's different from what I understood the motion to be.
I would just
Yeah.
making an
Sorry.
observation that we will bring that up separately and consider it separately.
The reason I object is because considering it separately I think should take place either under general discussion of the bill or as an amendment to the bill rather than as a separate discussion as a motion. But I think our intent is all the same. We're going in the same direction anyway.
Mayor Pro Tem, I think that a motion that would be in order would be to divide the question. I think a motion to divide the question would be appropriate.
Do I have a motion to divide the
I
question?
move to divide the question, dividing out the mention of EMS Fund 125.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second to divide the question, removing EMS Fund 125 from the agenda bill and discussing it separately. Questions?
You can take a vote on that.
Point of
Any
information, please.
motions?
Does that leave only the EMS project that we're voting on?
Right at the moment.
At the moment,
No,
yes.
We're voting on everything but the EMS.
You're just pulling out the EMS out of this to vote on it
Okay.
separately.
What does everything include? Does it include just the project that they've just described, or does it include everything on this list?
Everything.
It includes everything except the EMS 125.
And just as a point of clarification, the motion that's on the floor right now is simply to divide the question.
Yes.
That's correct.
And then, once you take that mechanical action, then you would be back to, then you'd have two questions to consider, and one's on the table, which is the remainder of the budget.
So we need a vote.
I've got serious reservations with some of these projects.
Let's,
We probably
Councilman
hold the
Sh-
comments
yeah.
at this point until we discuss the remainder of the bill.
What I was searching for was
Yeah.
some way of doing that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Councilman
I yield to
Shoemaker,
this.
what would happen is if we pass this, then you could offer up an amendment to pull out whatever you want to vote on separately.
Great.
Okay?
The motion just now to take the EMS fund out of it, correct?
Got it. I just wanted to know what was left.
Okay, I think I have a motion and a second to divide the bill.
Question, right?
Divide the question, pardon me. And do we have any other comments about dividing the question? Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? None. Yes.
Councilwoman, I would like to make a motion to separate out the South Side sidewalks from the $60,000 project.
Second?
So dividing that question.
Which one is that? What fund is it?
General
That's the
Street
General
Fund.
Street Fire Fund.
I'm sorry. What are we dividing out now?
this one right here. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this one right here.
Oh, excellent. I have a motion and a second to divide the,
I don't think we have a second yet.
we don't have a
Yes.
second, we do.
Yes.
We did?
I
Okay.
heard a second, yes, I did.
Michael, okay.
All right. I have a motion and a second to divide out the increased expense for East Street SSSW, $287,000 from the General Street Fire Fund expenditure.
Correct.
Excellent. Any discussion?
Are you asking for a second?
No.
I'm asking, nope, discussion at this point. We have a second. Any discussion? No discussion, excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? I'm not sure where we are now.
Passed.
Okay, we are now, at this
Oh,
point,
oh, excellent.
at this point, the
Do we-
motion on the floor is everything except the South Side sidewalks and the EMS Fund 125.
All right. Excellent. Do I have a second? It's regarding the motion to pass the original agenda bill 5611?
It was moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded, excellent. Now that's what we're voting on, is that correct? Excellent. I have a motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 5611, excluding increased expense for East Street SSSW, $287,000 from expenses, and EMS Fund 125 at $150,000. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
I'd like to divide out Fund 126 fire impact fees for discussion.
What, I'm sorry, where's,
You'll have to let me know, be more specific, which line items, Councilman Shoemaker?
Okay, I'm using the second page there.
Revenue.
Let's see where that is.
That's a housekeeping item. Ms. Forsberg, would you care to enlighten us?
We are just, it's a housekeeping item to move the restricted revenues that we receive for fire impact fees into their own fund so that we can properly account for them.
Okay. Is that the same money that you intend to use to purchase the defibrillators?
No, that's the EMS Fund 125.
My mistake, thank you. Disregard.
So you're withdrawing your
I
motion,
withdraw
sir?
my motion.
Thank you.
My amendment.
Any further council comments before we vote? Excellent. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Excellent. So, moving to the first altercation to this 5611 EMS Fund 125, $150,000.
Actually, I would ask unanimous consent that we consider the sidewalks first.
All right. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Moving on to the
All right, so
increased expense
Now
for
we
East
need a
Street
motion.
SSSW. That's correct. I need a motion on the table to introduce that.
I move that we approve the South Side sidewalk expense for East Street. It's listed as $287,000.
Second. Any council discussion?
Yes, Councilwoman. I actually rise in opposition to this, this amendment because, a couple things. While, yes, this was a part of the original design that we had looked at, one of the things I have not seen is any kind of a study or any kind of a report on how often that side of the street is even used. And I say that only because there's only about 12 trailers in the trailer court down towards Lacamas, and they have a crosswalk to get across, not too far from where their entrance is. And so I've never seen, you know, by building this sidewalk, are we building it for 6 people who use it daily or 2 people? We don't know. We're just saying, let's build it. The other thing I think we haven't considered as well is if someone does come in and develop the properties on the south side, they will be responsible for putting in sidewalks. And so we're assuming a cost for potential development that could happen on the south side for a certain amount of people that we don't even know how many of them use that side or would use that side of the street. The other thing that is concerning as well, and I voiced this last time, was that we are in dire need of sidewalks within 5-block radius of our schools. J Street, 20th Street, the sidewalk from leading from the neighborhood name escapes my name, Sunset Ridge, leading over to the middle school. And this money could go very far in putting in one or some of those sidewalks. I understand yes, it's we're pulling it out of the general fund, the federal reserves, yes. So I understand you know, we're already there, we're doing work. I understand that argument completely. But when I look at the needs of our citizens and I have to weigh them, I would much rather see that $250,000 go to sidewalks where we know they'll be used versus putting something in that development's going to pay for anyway if it comes. So just something to consider. I'll be voting against this just because I don't think personally think it's a wise use of money. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions for the Public Works Director. It's my understanding that some of that property is city property.
Yes, that's correct.
So unless, and I know we don't have planning and development here, but if I remember correctly, it's pretty narrow and it's really not development property. So if anybody's going to build the sidewalks there, it's going to be the city. Is that your impression?
There are some areas where development could occur, where they could potentially put a sidewalk in. What we're focusing on are the areas where there is no sidewalk or no hard scape right now, so no hard surface. So in front of all those businesses, we would not be adding sidewalk. It's just to those areas where nothing exists right now.
And
if
so
that helps.
nothing exists now, so for anyone to be using that, they would need to be wading through the weeds to walk on that side of the street at this point anyway.
Yeah, it's an unimproved path. There is encroachment into the right-of-way in various areas as well.
Mayor Pro Tem, just to add a comment, Councilman Russell brought up the fact that, which we had considered as we reviewed this option, the notion that if development came in, certainly they'd have to meet our street standards, put in half-street improvements, and we thought about, should we leverage that future potential as opposed to investing here ourselves? And one of the things that came to mind for us is that it might be an incentive to look at those properties if the sidewalk was already there. I don't know if that would make or break something, but it would be something that would make that property more attractive than potentially one where they'd have to put in their own half-street improvements. So sometimes, when you develop an arterial as a capital project, it does provide that sort of an incentive. And then the only other comment that I would offer is that you've identified, Councilman Russell, a number of our capital needs along sidewalks. There's no doubt about it. We've got many unmet needs over there. If all taken equal, would this be the sidewalk that would rise to the top in our PED and bike plan? I don't know that it is. I think the thing that would make it stand out now is the dollars per foot, if that's a unit cost that you could consider for a sidewalk project that we can leverage to do this project now versus what it would cost us for a brand new project over somewhere else, is such that the money that we have, the 287, probably wouldn't get us too far actually with a significant project around the schools. Whereas we're very hopeful because of some of the mobilization that's already gone on when we do a small works process that we'll get a really good price for this particular project. But I wanted to acknowledge that concern that indeed we have many unmet sidewalk needs in the community.
Rod?
Jim, would you tell us again about the fact that if we do put this sidewalk in now, that if we put it in later, after the street's all done and the brand-new paving and striping and everything else that's in place, they have to go back in and cut into the brand-new street?
Not necessarily. That's only if we look at access management and approach the curb and gutter. We will be constructing the sidewalk in this fashion, just the sidewalk, and we won't be addressing the access management issues along there. And that was precisely the reason why, so we didn't have to go back through and recut the street. Scheduling was an issue as well.
Molly?
Just for a point of clarification, the E Street project is already adding sidewalks on the entire length on the north side and on the south side from 32nd to Washougal River Road, so that this amendment would pertain to south side sidewalks where there is no hard surface between Washougal River Road and 6th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I've really had a lot of conflicted views about this project because it is a substantial expenditure of funds. However, it seems like we are going to be doing 3/4 of the sidewalks in this corridor, and while they're not well used now, I think in the future they could be. And there have been many, many times I see people walking in the grass, but if they had sidewalks, there might be more pedestrians. And I think that the timing is right to do this right now, albeit at a significant cost. Sidewalks are expensive regardless of where they're at. And as well, there are bus stops on the south side. And I understand that under RCW, Washington State regs, that sidewalks are, crosswalks are implied at intersections, and there is legally crosswalks there, but E Street is still a very difficult street to cross nonetheless. Whether there's a painted crosswalk, a legal crosswalk, or no crosswalk, it's difficult. So I would vote rise in support of this expenditure because of those reasons.
Michael?
Yes, just as a clarification, my understanding is that there are certain portions of the sidewalks that were taken out of the south side. Are we, or are we not, paving the sidewalks on the south side from Washougal River Road to 32nd Street? Is that still in the project?
Yes, originally some of that was value engineered out. That is back into the project.
Okay.
TIB required that.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Any other comments? Dave?
I like sidewalks for all the reasons that everybody's mentioned. I dislike them for all the reasons that everybody else has mentioned. But in addition, I've got one concern that for me is the deciding factor, and that is that this money's going to have to come out of reserves. And it just happens to almost exactly total the amount that we're going to have to take out of reserves to make up for a problem that was not recognized when we created the EMS fund. That's going to be $291,819. And now this is another $287,000 that we're going to take out of reserves. The rest of these projects want to take a couple $100,000 more out of reserves. I'm concerned that we've been taking money out of reserves steadily for 3 years now. And the economy doesn't appear to be picking up. The reserves are not picking up very much as a result of that. And our expenses are picking up all the time. So especially considering the price of gas, which affects everything we do. We are a service organization. We deliver services, and we deliver those with vehicles. So every one of them has to be fueled, and the price of that is going up all the time. And there's not much relief in sight there, it looks like. It might come down, it might go back up again, but overall it's going to stay at a high level for a long time to come. So as a result of this, I cannot in good conscience vote for something that takes money out of the reserves just because it's a good project. Staff wouldn't bring it to us if it wasn't a good project. I like the fact that it would save money if we did it now. I don't like the fact that we'd have to take it out of reserves, and I can't vote for it on that basis.
Any other comments? Michael?
I do appreciate the comments that Councilmember Shoemaker made, and that reminded me of some other factors that affect this. We always have the desire to have beautiful sidewalks, beautiful streets, and yet funds are always limited, and that's always going to be a factor for us. As we balance taking from reserves versus, the time that it, or should I say, the extra cost that it would take for the city to undertake this same exact project at a time when there isn't the mobilization there. That's something we have to balance in regards to how important these reserves are going to be in the future. So if I may ask a question, I know we've heard about the mobilization issue. Is there a dollar number that we know about how much difference there might be doing it now versus doing it in the future?
Yes, mobilization is factored in. I don't have that number in front of me tonight. I'm sure I could get that for you from the project manager.
Any further discussion? All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the increased expense for East Street SSSW, $287,000. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No. Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Coaston?
Aye.
Councilmember Shoemaker?
No?
Councilmember Delavar?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem McDaniel?
Aye.
Councilmember Greenlee?
Aye.
Councilmember Morris?
Aye.
And Councilmember Russell?
No.
Motion passes.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we, don't even know how to describe it at this point, that we pass the ordinance, the portion of the ordinance involving EMS Fund 125.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to pass the increased starting fund for EMS Fund 125 for $291,819. Any discussion? Rod?
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to hand out some information that I have tonight with me to all the council. And what it amounts to is, I'd like to at least take a second look at option 1, and I have that with you. And also on my second sheet has the hours of the most call volume in the city of Washougal, and I'll explain myself. So anyway, we've had several emails from citizens. Some have stepped up to the microphone and talked with us tonight and in the past. And one of the things that I know that we had been discussing was option 4, which would be, amongst some other things, would be to bring the medic unit into Station 171 and staff at that direction, with 24 hours. One of the things that I'd like to bring up here is that with option 1, either way, if we move this ambulance to Station 171 or leave it at 172, they'd be here for 12 hours a day. And the piece of documentation that I brought shows that the largest call volume is between 9 in the morning and actually 11 at night, 10 o'clock at night. So, and this is a proposal that Camus actually sent to us and said, what would option 1 would be simply to eliminate 2 firefighter paramedic positions of an annual savings of $183,000, and overtime would be required to backfill for staff leaves. My proposal tonight would be that we use option number 1, based on the fact that we can go with the fact that everybody in the community, a lot of people in the community say that they'd love to have that ambulance here. But I also think that if we went out to the voters that said they wanted to pass the EMS levy, that they would understand that with economic times the way they are, I'm not anxious to get rid of those reserves in that 125 fund. So my proposal tonight is that we would use option number 1, and wherever the ambulance ends up, at either at 172 or 171. But that's going to be a cost savings to the city of Washougal. We keep those reserves in there. In this proposal for the EMS 125, there's a money set aside for a new ambulance. East County Fire and Rescue put money towards a brand-new ambulance last year, and I'm not saying that that's it. It's kind of our turn to step up with that, and that's what those monies are for. The Life Pack 15 is without question something that we need to put on that ambulance, and doing the other proposal that Chief Schumacher has is that we buy the AEDs, one putting here at City Hall and one each at Jump to Guard in the high school. So I think there's reasonable savings on the end of this and we would still get the coverage in the hours that are the most critical, most often used for the ambulance service.
Mayor Pro Tem, just as a point of clarification, the motion that's before you regards the $150,000 additional appropriation in EMS. The 291 housekeeping item was part of the overall motion that previously passed. And
I see. Thank you for the clarification.
And to affect what Councilman Morris is suggesting, I think the action the council would take would be to vote against this motion to not appropriate the funds, and then the question of the continuing discussion of what the solution would be to the EMS shortfall would ultimately come before you in an interlocal agreement that would talk about what the hours would be or where they would be. So it wouldn't necessarily be that you would be voting on option 1 tonight. Rather, it would be to not approve the $150,000 additional appropriation. Certainly that would give staff direction about how to pursue the issue. That's just the mechanics I wanted to clarify.
John?
Is there anything that is pushing us and driving us to pass this tonight? Or to take some action on this tonight? versus 2 weeks from now?
I don't think 2 weeks would make a difference. I do believe that our partner Camas in the EMS system needs to get some finality on this question so that they can take appropriate action or plan, because the EMS budget is upside down for 2011. Their contribution to that situation is to tap into their reserves to shore that up. So I think it would be important to get a decision to Camas as quickly as we could. Now, if it waited until our next meeting, I don't know that would make or break the situation. I don't think it would.
So currently, what's on the table is option number 4, or not an option at all?
What's on the table
Is a dollar amount?
is a supplemental budget appropriation request for $150,000. What it symbolizes, I guess, is option number 4. And just as a reminder to the council, what's all part and parcel with this $150,000 is the trial period consolidation between the two departments, and all of the other pieces that go with it. But the only formal action right now is the appropriation. Follow-on actions would be renewed interlocal agreement, MOUs with the firefighters unions or union. I believe those would be the only follow-on actions.
Any other council comments, Paul?
I admit that this whole issue swirls around in my head. It's clear that it is not sustainable. The most attractive piece of option 4, as described, was a trial consolidation of parts of the two departments with the hope that there could be, and it's at this point only a hope, that there could be some substantial savings involved in that. I want to be clear that if that does go forward and we do that trial, that if there are no significant savings, it's just not sustainable. We cannot continue to feed this situation. And, you know, at some point, as wonderful and really as top drawer as the Camas service is, at some point we need to start thinking about alternate suppliers. And so I have to admit that I really don't feel like I'm ready to decide this question.
Dave?
Point of information, I believe that Mayor Dennis said that he needed action on this by the 16th of May, so that would give us time to take it up in 2 weeks.
That may be, Councilman Shoemaker. I don't recall that specifically, but you may be recalling that correctly.
I think he indicated that was his deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I think if we're discussing whether or not to pass this tonight or not, I would urge my fellow council members to decide this issue tonight rather than putting it off to the future. The main reason why is we've heard, granted there are a lot of issues that could be resolved, more negotiations, more discussions between the departments that we can have, yet when it comes to making these plans, if we put it off more, the likelihood that we'll be pressured into accepting the $150,000 expense is much higher from my estimation. From what I can tell from the public comments that we've received, as well as from council direction so far, it seems like there is significant opposition to increasing the expenditure. I have a couple of concerns about increasing the expenditure simply because we have the reserve funds and Camas doesn't. Every city government has been dealing with shortfalls, and we've had to deal with tightening budgets and renegotiating wherever we can renegotiate. And we will be renegotiating ourselves with our interlocal agreement, because as I understand it, our interlocal agreement has actually expired as of the beginning of this year, which is a very unfortunate position for us to be in when we're considering that we don't have an agreement on the table. And in fact, if we've made any payments to them, I'm not sure we can really back that up with saying it's under this agreement. At any rate, I will be opposing this motion on the floor for a couple of different reasons. The main reason is that the that I am not convinced that this is really going to be the best solution for our citizens. I agree with Councilmember Morris that other options may be better for the city, whether it's renegotiating what our levels of service are, or whether it is finding a sustainable, long-term service level that we can accept. But if we pass this tonight, that won't happen very easily in the way that I think it probably could happen best. I yield the floor.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, John?
The reason I would like to see this table tonight is because I think there's got to be some clarity brought to it. There's a lot of history here. It just isn't with this money that we have withheld. This goes all the way back to the AMR discussion when we were talking about privatizing the ambulance service. When we talked about that, we had every union in the county working against us not to have this AMR contract go through, and AMR backed away from the table as well. We also had, there was an instance where Camas and East County tried to make something work, but that didn't come together. East County has made their opinions known on this as well, but how do they fit in as players? There are just way too many organizational issues that have just not been addressed with this at all. And so I really believe we've got to have some organizational clarity, and I think even the discussion of a trial run with Camas kind of muddies the water when we're dealing with this issue as a whole, my opinion. But, you know, when I hear from individuals within the fire department who are full-time that they're having heartburn, not only about this issue, but about the consolidation. And I'm also hearing other stories, you know, a different story from the administration. There's just a lot of things going on that we just do not have clarity on. And I think to allocate this money tonight would be a complete disaster.
Rod?
Just for point of clarification, Jennifer, if we were to make a decision tonight, one way or the other, there is no money being sent until there's a contract written, and all of these details would be worked out at that contract time. Is that correct?
Correct. There would need to be various agreements and MOUs put in place prior to payment.
Okay.
It would just appropriate the funds so that we wouldn't have to come forth again with another budget amendment, but that is a possibility as well.
Dave?
Is it not correct, though, that if we pass this tonight, Camas will take that as a go-ahead signal to do what they want to do, to move towards the consolidation?
If you approve this appropriation, then the very next step will be the drafting of a renewed interlocal agreement.
And that's an indication that Camas has taken this as a green light.
Certainly. If you approve this appropriation, I would say certainly that would be the message coming from the Washougal Council.
Okay.
That we're moving toward the option number 4 and the trial consolidation, absolutely.
Based on that, I think a little extra time to investigate this might be in order.
I'd make a motion to table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table Agenda Bill 5611, oh no, pardon me, EMS Fund 125 for $150,000.
And I would ask the administration as well if they have something they could bump out of our next workshop to put this as a hot first priority.
May I amend the motion? Table it to bring it back on the 16th for a vote so that we can answer Camas's deadline?
You can make a motion to table for a time certain.
That's correct. If you can amend your motion.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion for to table this for a time certain. We don't need to set it, the 16th of May then.
Excellent. I have a motion to table this item, the EMS Fund 125, to May 16th council meeting. And I have a second.
Second.
Second. Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
No. Okay. Motion passes.
So that being said, now we have to finish the rest of it, don't we?
The rest
That's
of
it.
what?
Because you divided the question, so they.
We divided
Okay.
the question.
Okay.
That's correct.
And on to the item number 2 under new business.
Right.
Excellent.
Do we need to make a motion to pass and publish?
We did.
That was done when you divided, yeah.
Trying to stay with it here.
Thank you.
Moving on to Agenda Bill 57-11, the Angelo Field lease agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember McDaniel. I do have a handout, kind of the last minute memorandum from the city attorney.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So staff has received communication from Robert Angelo regarding the rental property currently referred to as Angelo Park. Again, Mr. Angelo is asking the city to cover the cost of his annual property taxes for the use of these 2 parcels. The original agreement was month-to-month contract with Mr. Angelo at a cost of $1 per month. The 2011 property taxes for these 2 parcels total $5,757.56, amounting to a $587.23 increase from the 2010 taxes of $5,170.33. Due to the need for budget cuts, the funds were expended in 2010. For these costs were determined to be discretionary and were cut from the 2011 budget. Therefore, this would be a use of reserves. However, these fields are used by several local sports leagues that our young citizens belong to. The city has amended the original ground lease agreement to reflect the following: to pay the 2011 payment for the use of these parcels for local youth sports, to extend the agreement through 2016 for the payment of the annual property taxes with a not-to-exceed amount of $7,500 per year, inserted with a without cause termination clause for either party upon 30 days written notice, has included language into the contract that if the written termination is submitted, that the taxes shall be prorated and refunded, or a refund made to the city for the months that the properties were not used. So also, under Section 2, the city attorney is recommending adding the language that's in front of you as follows: payment of taxes herein shall be made on a reimbursement basis to the landlord. Payment will be made within 30 days of the proof by the landlord that the appropriate payment has been made to the county. Staff is recommending that council authorize the mayor to sign the agreement as we propose it to be amended.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the new ground lease agreement with Robert and Ann Angelo.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to sign the new ground lease agreement with Robert and Ann Angelo as amended.
Madam Mayor.
Comment?
Point of information, is, at this point, is the amended language in this, or do we need to amend it?
If your motion were to state amended pursuant to that language, it would cover.
With that modification, then?
Comments, John?
Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, do we know if park impact fees can be used to pay these taxes?
I don't believe so, because they're to pay for improvements to the property, not maintenance,
Not operation.
not operation.
Okay.
Yeah. It'd be for, park impact fees, I believe, are for capital expenditures, and this is not an acquisition, but it's a lease, so I think technically it probably couldn't be used.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Dave?
Are these funds coming out of the reserves?
Yes.
This is a general fund expenditure. the budget amendment that you passed just previously includes this appropriation. The action before you now is to implement that by authorizing the mayor to sign. Certainly, if the council was concerned about that, we wouldn't expend the approved appropriation.
In that case, I'd like to amend the motion, if that's appropriate.
You're amending the motion?
I'd like to amend the motion. The motion is to pass.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to amend it to say that we pass it, but we take the money from somewhere else, and I would offer up council training funds. I believe in what we call management to budget. Manage to budget, sometimes called pay-as-you-go, and I don't want to take it out of the reserves. Take it from somewhere else, it's a lesser priority, and I think that's a lesser priority than the kids of Washougal. So my motion is to amend the main motion to take the money to pay for this from council training funds. And Dave, I believe you were going to be able to give us a balance in that account?
Yes, just
Thank
one
you.
moment.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second on the amendment to the motion? Before we discuss?
Dies for field loss for lack of a second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm asking for a second.
I didn't hear Mr. Greenlee's comment.
I just said the motion to amend dies for lack of a second.
I will second it because I'd like to just quickly have a debate on this real quick, so I'll second the
Excellent.
motion.
Mr. Scott? Ms.
Do you have
Forsberg?
the amount?
Yes. So there's roughly $6,000 that was approved in the original budget for council training. However, some of the funds have been used, so there's roughly probably only about $5,000 remaining in that account.
It's a good start. So I would have to amend my motion again to take what we can out of council training and the rest of it out of somewhere else.
I think we're at 3 amendments. I think that's not allowed under Robert's rules. The third amendment is
I
not allowed.
believe I can withdraw my amendment and put in a different amendment,
It's already seconded.
although I probably wouldn't want to do that because I've already got a second, and it appears it was hard to get.
Let's clarify where we are then. in
Let's
terms
please
of
do.
That motion that's on the table has been seconded. That, I think it was to use council training. You didn't have any limit on it at that time. I don't think.
No, he said specifically $7,500.
Okay.
Up to 7,500.
Yes, are we still in the comment period? Because the amount on the table is $5,757.56. Is that correct? Ms. Forsberg, what was the total you said?
Up to 7.
It's 57, it's the 57 number, sorry. I don't have it.
57, 56.
The up to 7,500 was for the, because it's for a 5-year time frame, so we didn't want to have it unlimited in the contract. So we wanted to cap it for future. Is where the up to 7,500 came into play.
I see. John?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I actually will be opposing this, even though I seconded. And the reason I'll be opposing it is because while I agree philosophically with PAYGO, that for people who don't know what that is when you need more money for a budget item, instead of going to reserves, you take it from somewhere else in the budget. I think philosophically that's a great way to do business. But unfortunately, unless we have the whole council buying in on that philosophy and that way of doing business, and we have that as a model or an adopted way of doing business for the council, that would need to apply to everything. And just to apply it to this, I don't think would be appropriate. I think PAYGO would need to be applied evenly across the board if we were going to do it.
Any other council comments? Dave?
May I respond? I understand your concerns, and I share them. I think this would be an excellent opportunity to set an example of how to do it, and then come back at the next workshop and put it on the agenda to talk about how we establish a citywide philosophy of managed to budget, a process of managed to budget. so that whenever somebody turns up short in one department, if they can't find it in their budget, then we look citywide and determine whether or not the need that they've got is more important than needs in other departments, which can give us real flexibility.
Paul?
One of the problems with that as a management philosophy is that we've changed our budgeting philosophy here in the city over the past year from budgeting for what we might have to spend to budgeting for what we were absolutely certain we had to spend. And because of that, they're really doing additional reductions is if you use this particular technique of saying, well, any supplemental, any contingency that we have to fund after the budget is finalized in December of the preceding year, then every director, unless they're not paying attention, is going to find a way to build into their budget enough for those contingencies. And then we have lost our process of budgeting to exactly the expenses that we consider that we pretty much have to spend. And as was explained at the beginning of 2010, with the new budget process, since we are budgeting with such a sharp pencil at the beginning of the process, we have to be willing to be a bit more flexible in changing the budget as time goes on. Especially since both revenues and expenditures are probabilistic numbers. You really don't have them with a high degree of certainty, especially when the budget is set in October, November, December of the preceding year. So I would argue that if we want, and I personally do, want to continue this particular sharp pencil approach of budgeting, that we need to be willing to deal with the contingencies as they come up, and rather than having the directors build those contingencies into their budget.
Any other comments? Dave?
It's an interesting approach, but what that really means is that you spend the money later rather than sooner. If you take your budget as simply a guideline instead of hard and fast rule, then anything that comes up comes out of reserves, and it does come up. We've been asked for a sum and a supplemental here 3 months into the fiscal year, a sum that totals 20% of the budget. I'm sorry, 20% of the reserves that we have. Well, if that comes along every quarter, we're going to be broke pretty quickly. The idea of a sharp pencil budget is meaningless if you're going to go to reserves every single time something comes up that's not in the budget. There are emergencies for which you have to tap reserves. If the two bridges that lead us to the outside world here to the west drop because of an earthquake, that's an emergency. We should tap reserves to try to get ourselves out of that and take care of the people that we've got to take care of. If fire sweeps through the city, burns half of it down, yeah, that's an emergency. If the dike breaks out here and floods the city, that's an emergency. But it's not an emergency to build sidewalks in an area where people are walking through a beaten path already. Heck, I went to school in the 6th grade in Florida down a beaten path between the palmetto trees and had to take a stick along to fight off the rattlesnakes to get them out of my path.
And it was uphill both ways.
I don't see anybody doing that here. I see people walking down a path. They're not even walking through the weeds. They've used it enough that they've beaten the path through the area. So this idea that you can't manage the budget, that you have to be flexible on everything that comes up after the budget is set, doesn't make any sense to me. It just means you're going to spend the money later rather than sooner. But you are going to spend the money, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. I don't want to see those reserves dwindle. We're looking at an economy that's not supporting us very well in terms of our taxation. It's dropped, our revenues have dropped, and that doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. So I would like to put some controls in place not to spend the reserves for spurious projects. Thank you.
Molly?
Actually, Councilman Shoemaker, I guess I would disagree with you on this one, and I would agree with Councilmember Greenlee. I do believe, the staff and the departments have done an incredible job in the last year of tightening the belt and tightening it again and tightening it again. And we have asked a lot out of them, and they have all come through on that. And I do believe that this, by passing this tonight and having it come out of reserves, gives them at least a token idea that we have a certain amount of faith in their efforts, and we reward their efforts to be very conservative and very frugal. And I do believe that what tends to happen is that when we have a budget, and it's a very tight, lean, mean budget, that there are additional monies that come into reserves that would have been in a budget line item for just contingency factors. And so you'll see those, but the reserves grow, and really a certain layer of that, I think we should be using, or not, no, I won't say that. It's not that we should be using it. It is available for our use and still remains. We still have ample reserves for the future. I do agree with Councilman Shoemaker that we do have many serious issues in the future years, and we do not see this problem go away. But in this sense, yes, I do agree with Councilman Greenlee.
Michael?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I rise in support of this motion, and my main reason for rising in support of this motion, the amendment to the main motion, is that the mayor last week mentioned why this line item was not in the 2011 budget. And in his explanation of why it wasn't in the budget, he mentioned that it was a mistake, or half a mistake, if I remember correctly. He said, well, it was kind of a mistake that we left it out of there, but at the same time, it helped balance the budget. And so on some level, the mere fact that this ground lease increase in rent or increase in lease was not approved as part of the normal 2011 budget is really it's the fault of the council as a whole when we considered the budget last year. It may not have been pointed out to us. I can't remember exactly, but I know that we always have comparison with what was appropriated last year and what is asked for this year. And in that comparison, we had an opportunity to examine the fact that we had an expenditure of, what was it, $5,100 last year, and this year it's $1. I think that, or $12, so it's $1 per month. I think that as much as I like decreasing revenue or decreasing expenditures, that one probably should have caught our eye, and the policy discussion as to whether we pay the increased lease should have been taken place when we originally passed the bill. At any rate, considering that it was the council's decision to pass the budget, I do support this amendment to pay for at least some of the funds out of the city council's training budget.
Dave?
Final comment. I think Councilmember Costa and I, our disagreement is based on the definition of ample as applied to reserves.
Could be.
I also have a comment. Ms. Forsberg, regarding the appropriation of funds, is it appropriate for council to move funds from a council fund over to a parks fund for any purpose?
They're all general fund monies, so the money coming from the reserves is general fund, and the money from the council budget would be general funds
All
as
right.
all. also.
Where in the summary statement does it talk about the, where the funds are coming from?
In the budget amendment?
Where is that? Okay. So if we approve this, would the funds always be coming out of the council training fund for the next 5 years? Is that correct?
I think it'd only have to be for this 1 year, because you
That was
haven't
not the-
budgeted
That was
for-
not the intent of my motion, no.
I see.
Just 1 year.
She's-
And also, there's a new council next year.
Right.
Really, the council has appropriated these funds as part of the supplemental budget in your previous action, and you're being asked to authorize the mayor to sign the lease. The amendment to the motion really is kind of direction to the administration, if you would, to say, sign this lease, but we would ask you to not expend the council training budget and use the savings therefrom to make up for the appropriation that we did, such that the $5,500 wouldn't have that nexus between reserves and what we're doing. At the end of the year, there will either be a surplus in the general street and fire fund year over year, or there will be a deficit of some amount.
So will this be budgeted for
the-
starting in
in the
2012, coming
future-
out of the Parks Fund?
In the future, these are general funds.
General funds, all right.
In the future, it would be our intent, as we mentioned, I think at the workshop, that we continue to do this lease arrangement that was enhanced in this way in terms of paying the property taxes sometime last year when the Angelos approached us and asked us to pick up the property taxes for them, and we brought a lease agreement to the council. And at that time, there were enough funds in that line item to cover the cost, and so we didn't have to take any budget action.
I see.
And when the original budget was passed, we did not, I know that we did not go line by line to this level of detail, Councilman Delavar, to point out to the council. So it wasn't an oversight on the council's part. It wasn't looked at that level of detail. But because of where we're at and how tight the budget is, really we felt that it needed to have a separate look as part of a supplemental budget request. So I guess all of that to say, if this amendment passes, staff and the administration will take that as some direction to limit the expenditures out of your council training this year in order to kind of cover this cost. But in the future years, we would be wanting to budget for adequate and appropriate training for the council, and then at your discretion, you could approve that or not. And this would be in the parks line item in terms of operational expenditures around leases and the sort.
All right, any other comment? Yes, Dave?
And if we're in better shape financially next year, I'd be the first one to support council training.
I just wanted to get a sense of what we talk about council training budget. What else does it cover besides training?
I believe the luncheons and breakfast meetings that you go to from the different, the council chambers, Camas Washougal chambers luncheons come out of the training budget. Some of those registration fees and whatnot for AWC presentations that you go to. All those types of things come out of those line items.
It includes travel expenses as well?
Correct, travel as well.
Travel and training is one line item.
I would just say that over the years, I have gone to a number of these trainings, and I have to admit that without the Budget Academy, I would find the whole budgeting and city finance situation impenetrable, to say the least. And I ran my own small business. I understand double entry bookkeeping. I understand all of that kind of stuff. I do my own taxes. I understand all that kind of stuff. But municipal finance is a very complicated subject. And there are a number of other things, like when you're first on council, you learn about the appearance of fairness doctrine, which has ramifications that are certainly not simple. And also the Open Public Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. There's a whole lot of material that you really need to be trained on in order to be able to do your job and keep the city out of court. So I think the training budget is important. And from my own knowledge of the training budgets that's been spent not only on myself but on other members, it's not like we're going to golf tournaments. That's not what this is about at all. We go to a training and we're in the training. This is not junket or anything like that. So I personally consider the training budget very important to running the city and running it well.
Yes, Dave.
The good news is that almost everything that you would get from any of this training is available online. Most of it from the Association of Washington Cities, and especially from their support arm, the Municipal Research Support Center, MRSC. So the information's available. You can do it by self-study. As a matter of fact, they have a lot of self-study courses. And if you can't do it that way, we're very fortunate to have colleagues here who understand all these things, and a staff which is committed to educating those of us on the council who may not quite pick up on the bookkeeping system that we've got, which is, in my 40 years in government, the most atrocious I've ever seen.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah, what's the motion?
Yeah, that's a good one. I have a comment. This is highly unusual as far as delegating where the funds are exactly supposed to come for paying for a particular expense. So I think that's good. I like it. I really do. So I'll be voting in favor of this amendment. Any further comments, John?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, could you just explain real quick your reasoning for taking this particular item and taking it out of council training? Why council training? Why not portion of the mayor's training? I mean, why just council training?
Because I'm a council member.
Right.
And it impacts me. And I felt that if I weren't willing to step forward and make the sacrifice and ask my colleagues to do the same, then I shouldn't be asking anybody else to do it. That was the sole leadership by example.
Paul?
I guess the point that I didn't make maybe as clearly as I wanted is that I don't consider the trainings that I go to as perks. That giving up that time to spend 3 days in Spokane or in Tacoma or in Yakima, or drive up to Kelso for an evening meeting, those are the sacrifices. And that I just want to be clear that we're not, at least from my point of view, this is, council training is not, number one, it is necessary. And number two, it's not a perk. And number three, that it actually involves substantial sacrifice on each of our parts to even go, because it takes a lot of time.
Okay. Yes, Rod. Oh, I'm sorry, Molly.
At least from my understanding, you know what, this is really a fairly small amount, and I understand that the philosophical argument behind it. However, if we were to pass this tonight, it would mean that our training budget would be zero for the balance of the year, and that all of our traveling would be, it's very rare that any of us, as a matter of fact, I can't think of it, when we go to meetings in Vancouver or in other parts of the metro area representing Washougal, that we ever turn in expenses to be reimbursed for gas. It's pretty rare that, and that means our official liaisons to other areas will pay for their own lunches. And it means that any important training that either newer or experienced council members choose to take, and that budget has been substantially decreased in the past few years, budget-wise, will not have an opportunity to do so. And furthermore, Salary Commission chose to reduce our salaries. That was a decision, and a number of us I know voluntarily asked to have that salary reduction instituted much earlier than the mandated time, as a gesture of faith in understanding of the constraints that are asked of us. So I would oppose this particular amendment to pull it from council training funds.
Any further council comments? Seeing, Rod? No? Okay. Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to amend the, authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement with Robert and Ann Angelo with the stipulation that the funds come out of city council training and travel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Morris?
No.
Councilmember Greenlee?
No.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Aye.
Councilmember Delavar?
Aye.
Councilmember Shoemaker?
Aye.
And Councilmember Coaston?
No.
I'm sorry, did the motion pass?
Yes.
I wasn't
Yes.
counting. Pardon me. Excellent. Wonderful. So we are now at the point in our agenda for the second public, oh wait,
No.
We'd have the main
We got to
motion.
pass
Oh.
the motion, so.
That's the amendment.
of course, I'm sorry. Now that the motion's been amended, we need to have a motion to authorize the mayor.
It's already on the floor.
It's on the
It's
floor.
already been moved
Any
and
further
seconded.
discussion before we move on? Excellent. Molly?
Yes, I would just like a clarification on the, I believe this is the appropriate time to have a good understanding of the paragraph written in somewhat legalese by Mr. Angelo to be added into the contract. And at least my understanding is that once Mr. Angelo shows us that he has paid the property taxes, that we would have 30 days from that point to pay him.
This was actually my proposed amendment, not Mr. Angelo's.
Oh, okay.
And the reason is 2.1 says how much it's supposed to be, but it doesn't say when during the year it's supposed to be paid.
Okay.
So I just wanted to have it specified that it would be at a particular period of time, and so I chose this method of saying, you give us the proof that you paid it, within 30 days we'll reimburse you.
Okay. so-
Typically, though I pay my taxes, I can only afford to pay half at a time, so half in April and half in October, so I assume that's what he would do.
Okay. But that is the intent of that paragraph.
That's the intent of it, just to specify, because then the next 2.2 talks about being in default. Well, how do you know if you're in default if there's no particular time that you're supposed to make the payment? So,
Madam Mayor, Pro Tem.
Yes, Michael?
I'm really glad that you inserted this amendment, or recommended this amendment. It does two things. One, it gives us a time when we actually need to pay the landlord. And it does the second thing, which I didn't catch, and I'm sure glad you did, and that is, what if he didn't pay his property taxes, but we paid him the amount? That would put us in sort of a sticky situation, and I don't want to accuse the Angelos of having the
no,
intention to
that's
do
not-
that.
That's not why the
Right.
is concerned.
But still, it gives us a better legal protection if that should, for whatever bizarre reason, be the case.
Right.
So I'm glad that the amendment has been put in there. Thank you.
Any other comments, council comments this time? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the new ground lease agreement with Robert and Ann Angelo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Is it time now? Oh, thank you. We're at the point in our agenda for the second public comment period. If there's anyone wishing to address the council, please step forward at this time and state your name and address for the record.
Is there somebody before me? I can't tell.
There is, but now that you're up, okay.
No, you're first. No, come. Got you. You don't have me, I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. Okay, thank you.
We're listening.
I bet all of you know why I'm going to stand up here and do this, and I'm going to do it anyway. I would like to thank you for putting in the sidewalk, because I can point to you right now to pedestrians who will be using it. I think I remember my first city council meeting a year ago in January, when I stood up back there, way in the back corner, and said that the reason the study showed that nobody walked on that part of property was because it was too sloppy, and nobody wanted to walk through a mud hole. So I just want to say thank you, and now that means I could go to that bus stop and use that bus stop whenever I want to, and not have to walk through the thorns.
Can you say your name and
I'm
address?
sorry.
That's all right.
Who doesn't know who I am? Barbara Curry, 303 Love Street, Apartment 4. I apologize, I forgot I had
That would be the lady in the office on the other side of the microphone listening to this tape. She doesn't know who you are. Okay, go ahead.
Don Bolin, 32934 Southeast 20th Street. I guess one of the reasons I came up here, I didn't feel Jennifer should go unscathed. But not really. Sitting out in the audience, one of the things, you know, and I want to couch this, I feel sorry for some of, maybe the lack of information the council gets. And let me give you an example. I know your mission is to drain the swamp. Of course, I'm sitting out there wondering, why do we have a swamp? And one of the reasons I think we have a swamp is, and I'm not against sidewalks, by the way, but I'm sort of amazed that we don't have a list, a backlog list of the things that need to be done. And I mentioned this before. Somebody says, well, we need to put in a sidewalk here, and the first thing we think about is, well, where else do we need sidewalks? You know, so one of the things I would think, and the staff is doing good, but I think it's hard to run a business unless you have a backlog and you have a priority. And somebody says, we need to fix the roads. I think in 10 seconds you know which one is the one you gotta go to first. And I think that information should be provided to the council. But I don't see it happening. And if I was in your position, I think it should. The only other thing on the area of information, I went to your open house, not, I guess, our open house on Highway 14. And I saw some of you folks there, which was nice. And I thought it was a good open house until I asked some questions. And the reason I asked some questions was, they had this deal on why roundabouts are good. 29% less pollution, no accidents, all this stuff. So I asked him, I said, is this Washougal? Where did you get these statistics? And well, I couldn't get an answer. So I can think of the worst case, you know, if that's New York City, well, we're not New York City. But the thing it reminded me of is, like you folks, you go to your doctor and they take an average of 100 patients, and based on what's wrong with them, they decide what we got to do for you. I don't like that kind of logic. I would have expected to know what's the situation in Washougal, That's where they're making their recommendation. Now, I don't know if you folks can insist on what I call relevant information for making your decisions. But I guess at least I would hope you'd voice an opinion that if you're gonna come and talk to me about what's needed in Washougal, do your homework and talk about specifically what's happening on Highway 14 and the 2 intersections. Just don't say on the average, this is what we can expect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Ripp. I'm the Executive Director for the Port of Kansas Washougal. I apologize for not being here on time. I made the assumption it was still 7 o'clock, so I apologize. It's my understanding that you guys passed the conceptual redesign for 14 at 27th and 32nd. I'm not sure if David had reiterated, but the port's going to partner on a portion of that project, so I wanted to thank you guys for passing that, and I'm looking forward to getting that moving forward and hopefully someday getting some construction going over there. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for the council at this time? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the Angelo Field. There was the amount mentioned was $7,500. Jennifer, is that yearly or altogether or what?
It's the annual yearly taxes.
So
and
the
it's-
7,500 is against the 5,000, both are
It's
yearly?
up to $7,500 if it increases over the 5-year period. It's $5,700 now, and then, but it's for a 5-year period. The maximum we would pay yearly is $7,500.
Okay, so that explains that. The council passed that to take the funds out of the training, but I really do feel that an educated person's value spreads. And I'm not knocking parks. I think parks are important. But I think that the more you people on the city council know, the better. And it isn't like you're going on to Las Vegas and do what we used to do down here. But I support what Paul said, and Councilman Costin here said, that spending money on the council members, I think, is important. And I know it's online, but I don't study well online, and maybe some other people don't either. Besides, being with like-minded learning people is very supportive.
Thank you. Any other comments for the council at this time? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to, oh no,
Council.
pardon me. I'm moving ahead of myself. Mayor's report. I actually do have something to do. Where is it? Proclamation. Should I just read it? Excellent. Building Safety Month, May 2011. Whereas our state's continuing efforts to address the critical issues of safety, energy efficiency, water conservation, and efficiency in the built environment that affect our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster, give us confidence that our structures are safe and sound. And whereas our confidence is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians develop and implement the highest quality codes to protect Americans in the buildings where we live, learn, work, worship, and play. Whereas the international codes, the most widely adopted building safety, energy, and fire prevention codes in the nation, are used by most U.S. cities, counties, and states. These modern building codes also include safeguards to protect the public from natural disasters, such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, and earthquakes. And whereas, to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown guardians of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us of safe, efficient, and livable buildings. And whereas, Building Safety Month, an international celebration of safe and sensible structures, the theme for Building Safety Month 2011 encourages all Americans to raise awareness of the importance of building and fire safety, pool, spa, and hot tub safety, and new technologies in the construction industry. Building Safety Month 2011 encourages appropriate steps everyone can take to ensure that the places where we live, learn, work, worship, and play are safe and efficient, and recognizes that countless lives have been saved due to the implementation of safety codes by local and state agencies. And whereas, each year in observance of Building Safety Month, Americans are asked to consider projects to improve building safety and sustainability at home and in the community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments and federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Now, therefore, I, Jennifer McDaniel, Mayor Pro Tem of Washougal, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2011 as Building Safety Month. Accordingly, I encourage our citizens to join with our community in participation in Building Safety Month activities. Excellent. As far as Mayor's report, I don't have anything. Is there anything that I was supposed to report?
I just had the proclamation.
Sorry, I was just notified a few hours ago that I would be doing this, so. Great. Moving on. Council comments. Yes, Molly.
I just have one, and since it's the first of the month, tomorrow, Tuesday, May 3rd, is the regular Regional Transportation Council Board meeting. And since I represent the cities of Camas and Washougal, I like to make my fellow council members aware of those meetings. And I do have a copy of the agenda. On the agenda, we have only one action item, which is the 2012 Unified Work Program here, which talks about the programs and projects that RTC staff undertakes and the expectations and performance levels of that outcome. It's not a budget document at all. It's a planning document. And discussion on draft transportation systems management and operations plan, draft safety management assessment, and a review of last Thursday's transportation and land use scenario planning workshop, which I did attend. So if anyone's interested in any of these topics, I would urge you to attend, and if not attend, certainly I'd be happy to provide you with information. It is at always the first Tuesday, 4 p.m. at the Public Service Center, Clark County Building in downtown Vancouver. Thank you.
Okay, any other, Paul?
Also, tomorrow night is the Clark County Mosquito Control Board meeting. I'm the representative on that. I would describe the entire meeting as routine. The only things that are on the table are to approve the same contract with the same contractor as we did last year for a helicopter for aerial spraying, and the same contract with the same suppliers for materials. The only thing that is a little different than the normal agenda is that we will actually have some video that we can watch of our staff at work. As I said, I think this meeting is just completely routine. I do want to mention that the Clark County Aging Readiness Group wants public input on community engagement. They will be having a meeting at the Red Cross Building on May 19th from 2 to 5. That's a Thursday. And anyone who's interested in more information on that, see me and I can give you the emails or the telephone numbers to RSVP. And I just wanted to correct something that Mr. Boland talked about. it's easy to get confused. The city is a very complicated situation. We have both a capital improvement project list and a transportation improvement project list. Those lists are compiled in approximate priority order. But the reality is that if it is not on the list, then it is not eligible for funding. So you put pretty much everything on the list that you think you would like to get done and put it in rough priority order. But then you apply for funding to the Transportation Improvement Board or the federal government or Department of Ecology or whoever it is, and they have their own system of scoring. And so what is number 6 on our list may actually be funded by someone else ahead of what's number 1 on our list. And so that means that that project gets done. And that to some degree, that's a little bit at work in this sidewalk project, that Transportation Improvement Board funded a big piece of the East Street project. And we took out some of the sidewalks on the south side east of Washougal River Road, but they insisted that they had to go back in. So in order to get the funding from TIB, we had to put those back in. The budget item here is to actually do the sidewalks west of Washougal River Road where they do not already exist. And our understanding is that there are substantial discounts involved because the contractor is already in the field. And so getting it done now ends up being significantly cheaper than it would be if we postponed it even 4 months. And also, SR 14, that is not a City of Washougal project. We have next to no input on that project. That is a State of Washington project on a State of Washington highway. The meeting that was held by Washington State Department of Transportation. Some of us from Washougal showed up, but we had nothing to do with the meeting, nothing to do with the content, and very little to do with the decision. The principal thing that we have been able to change over the 4 years, actually go back 5 years, there haven't been any changes in the past year, is the original project closed 2nd Street. That's the street that right in front of Wesley Ford. At our insistence, we got them to put in an overpass so that you would be able to get from effectively the south side of Washougal to the north side of the Washougal without leaving the city of Washougal, which is what their original design required. But fundamentally, that is a Washington State DOT project. And since almost all of it is in the city of Camas, Camas has a lot more to say about the project than we do. It's only the extreme eastern end of that project that's in Washougal. If you actually wanted to have, and frankly, they're going to break ground on this project. If you wanted to make any changes on this project, you really needed to do it 2 years ago. And the place to do that, especially since you're a resident of the county and not the city, is to go to the county commission meeting, because all 3 of the county commissioners sit on the transportation board. We have 1 representative which is shared for both Camas and Washougal. So if you actually want something done about that kind of thing, and as I said, it's really too late. They will break ground here in June.
Well, I guess the first thing, the list on projects, Paul.
Yes.
I just wanted.
Mr. Boland, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's council comment time. Can you save your comments possibly for after the meeting, or you guys can get together and discuss it? Thank you.
I also just wanted to mention that this coming Friday is the first Friday of the month, so it's Camas First Friday. And if you haven't had an opportunity to enjoy that, you really should sometime.
Any other council comments, Michael?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to mention that the Ethics Policy Review Committee had our first meeting today, and we actually covered quite a bit of ground and look forward to covering a lot more ground the next time that we meet together. With regards to the discussion about Planning Commission's rezoning issues, I do appreciate the comments from our council as well as from the city administrator, because it is appropriate to do things in the right order, and I look forward to having that discussion next week. If the council needs to take any action about any direction, of course, that's going to be a good place to start that discussion. I have some significant concerns about the proposal as we saw it last week. However, I'll refrain from commenting on it at this time and save my comments for workshop next week, and look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Dave?
I also wanted to comment on Mr. Boland's comment. First of all, I wanted to say thanks, Don. And secondly, well, I'll leave it at that. I see that there is a priority list in every department. The transportation and capital facilities lists meet that function in the transportation area. Every department has something like that. That's the good news. The bad news is that citywide, we don't do a very good job of managing to budget across those silos. It's siloed type information and operations. And this is not new in government. I've been dealing with that since the 80s. The good news is on that front is that Dave Scott and Mayor Gard are making major strides in opening up those silos and getting people to share information and work across the entire city, not only in budget but in information areas. So we're making progress there. All of which encourages me to suggest that we adopt the manage to budget philosophy and process citywide versus just in individual departments. This brings up one of my issues when you talk about funding projects, local control. I don't understand why the feds in the state take the lion's share of our taxes and then pat themselves on the back when we compete for a share of those taxes against other communities and we get a grant awarded. We do all the work, they take all the credit. And we get our priorities shifted, as Mr. Greenlee said, and sometimes we don't get funded what we need funded because we don't have enough money to do it. We're always reliant on grants. On the Highway 14 roundabout issue, it was taken out of the project list, excuse me, because if it had been left on the project list, there was no guarantee that it wouldn't be built, and building it would have been a disaster. So that's why it was taken off. The idea of having a roundabout on a 55-mile-an-hour highway, I have never understood the rationale for that. It's an invitation to rear-end collisions. We do have enough influence in the process with the state. Yes, it's a state highway, but we can influence that process. And Mr. Greenlee gave some examples of how we can influence that process. We had enough influence to take the roundabout out, and we have enough influence combining with the port to get the next concept in front of them and get it funded. So although it is a state area, they don't like to do things without our input. And if they did, I think we ought to take them to task for it. Finally, I'd like to thank Rod Morris for bringing more light to the EMS situation, and I look forward to discussing it next time. Thank you.
Rod?
Two things, Mr. Bolin, if we have extra money, Public Works has sidewalks to be built and lists of those sidewalks. Streets to be paved, there's lists of streets to be paved if we have extra money. So don't kid yourself. We have lists of priorities and we have 6-year plans that indicate which ones we want worked on next, and be it Stiles Road or in 32nd Street or any number, yeah, G Street, there we go. Get Maryland back on the G Street. But we have plenty of lists if we have plenty of money. But we have plenty of lists and we have no money. Would that be a fair statement? Also today we had a meeting with Chief Schumacher and Chief Mitchell, Councilman Russell and Councilman Shoemaker and I met with them on public safety, and we discussed, and we're continuing to discuss, fireworks and how those are regulated within the city of Washougal. We also talked about bringing back to council the sprinkler ordinance, and that's just simply, at this point in time, it's discussion, but seeing how that would fit and work and apply better to the city of Washougal. Many different discussions today with them about their budgets and the practices that they have going on. I know that the Chief Mitchell wants to increase the reserve opportunities for people to be a police reserve, and right now we're in the middle of training 9 volunteers, so the public safety is working on it, and we're trying to move forward and be able to supplement our paid staff in these times of economic problems with reserves or volunteers, so we're working at it.
Excellent. Any other comments from council? Everybody knows what comes next.
Madam Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.